We'll begin with an interactive slide that's already been built. This is a tabbed interaction, and it's already got all of the necessary buttons, triggers, and layers that it needs to function, and that includes this error layer, which has a text box with some directions and a button that is configured to hide this layer when the user clicks close. I've adjusted the slide layer properties so that this is presented as a dialog layer, which commands the learner's attention a little bit more. Next, we'll create a new variable under the Manage Project Variables panel. This variable will keep track of when the interaction is complete. We'll start by adding a variable and giving it a name. We typically name our variables after the slide they apply to, just to make it easy to keep track of them. Remember that variables can't have spaces in the name, so we typically use underscore or camel case. We'll change this to a true-false variable, and it will start out with the default value of false. Now we'll navigate back to the base layer, and I'm going to edit the next button trigger so that it only functions on the condition that the variable we just created is true. We'll also update the else condition so that it shows the error layer if that condition is not met. Now we're going to add triggers to each one of these layers to change the value of the trigger from false to true. It'll look like this. Adjust the variable to true when the timeline ends on this layer, and the condition will be if the buttons are in a state of visited. So I'll just make a copy of this part of the trigger and change it for each of the buttons that we have on our base layer. And now that I've built out this trigger once, I can in fact just make a copy of it here and paste it on the remaining two layers. For good measure, and to make sure that the learner doesn't navigate away from the slide before the end of the timeline, which means this wouldn't work, I'm going to go up to the Insert tab and insert a hotspot over the buttons. Hotspots are invisible buttons, and when they are added to a slide without a trigger, they can serve as interactivity blockers. So we'll just draw the hotspot over the buttons, and we're going to add a simple fade exit animation to this hotspot. Now my learner is prevented from interacting with these buttons until the end of the timeline. I'm going to make a copy of this blocker by pressing the shortcut keys Control-C on my keyboard, and I'll just paste it on the other layers. Control-V to paste. And finally, when we're ready to test our work, we can just go up here to preview this scene since we're spanning multiple slides, and we'll be able to see our error layers and our tabbed interaction to make sure that it's working. We hope that you found this tutorial helpful.